Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. You best believe it's another epi of League Unlocked, where we are beginning the preview extravaganza for MSI 2025 here in our home country of Canada, out in Vancouver. This is the World Semifinals that we were denied. What was that, 2022? 2021? We're getting makeup only 3 or 4 years later.
And if you're not already on your way over for MSI, another quick little pitch, I know, short time frame type of thing, I can promise you, Vancouver, Canada, absolutely a wonderful destination to visit. And on top of it, you know that the stadium, the crowd, the energy of the venue, I promise you, it's going to be there. It will be a place to be if you can get there. But if you can't get there, if you're like the rest of us, you're going to be at home, you're going to be enjoying these matchups. Let's take a quick look, a dive in on all of these teams and give them an early ranking before the event.
And don't worry, we got 2 Canadians that will be representing. Of course, not both from the same region, Mr. Jojo Pyun returning home, and then obviously Masu down in the bot lane for FlyQuest. So we got that north of the border representation. But yes, let's get into that nitty-gritty. 10 teams heading into this event, and we start with the bottom half of that board. Obviously, I think to the surprise of absolutely nobody, the representatives from the LTA South Furia sitting in that 10 spot, and that's even with them kind of smashing their way through finals. They completely destroyed Pain Gaming, especially in Game 3, and this was a rematch after they got sent to the losers bracket by Pain, who was a very familiar face from the previous CBLOL team, but this is the first fully Brazilian squad going to MSI since 2022. Only the top lane and support have any international experience, but they might be in for some curveballs. They pulled out the Yasuo Rakan bot lane in Game 3 of the finals.
And I think that's one of the angles that you got to play if you are Furia stepping into this MSI, is taking those interesting angles, is taking that unique opportunity within Champion Select to try and shake things up. An earned victory throughout the LTA South, as you mentioned, going through that situation, going down into loser bracket, and getting that revenge eventually in those finals. So certainly some pressure, some expectation in that regard. And for me, it's really looking at, okay, things have been relatively negative for the LTA South since the merger has happened, which to me was relatively a surprise, given knowing that there was going to be some uncertainty, but that the trajectory that the CBLOL was on before the merger and how everything had happened, you figured that would still continue, at the very least, hold ground type of thing. So that's what I need to see from Furia. I need to see them be a competitive thorn, right? Not necessarily predicting any real upsets, but I want to see some challenges. I want to see some difficulty thrown against a lot of these teams in that unexpected nature.
And obviously with this new best-of-5 format, yeah, a full upset, even more unlikely to be taking 3 games off of. I mean, they kick off against G2. If you want full disaster going over to EU, it's G2 drop in a full series to Furia, but you can't just get 3-0 swept in back-to-back series. Yeah, we need to see some competitiveness to kind of raise up that region and warrant them having a spot here, right? So let's say they lose to G2. They're obviously in that play-in stage and basically need a series win. Assuming this bracket goes as many people would expect, you're going to have a GAM versus Furia matchup at some point to completely eliminate one of those squads. So need at least a competitive showing against GAM, who obviously are right ahead of them in this ranking. But I think it's already a sizable gap because we saw GAM be competitive against the Flying Oysters in back-to-back series in these playoffs.
I do want to do a quick shout out to the Riot script writers. They might have had this matchup earlier before, because I think it's the 2023 Worlds video. You have Hans Sama for G2, and who's over there? Ayayu for this Brazilian squad. So yes, you have seen it before, maybe only in animated form, but we'll be getting it out on the real Summoners Rift. But ahead of it is GAM. And yes, this is going to be where I think it is a double step up the stairs. You're going up here in the ladder, climbing up the list of MSI. GAM steps in, a very proven team that has been tested through the LCP and has shown us that it's going to be more than just the Oysters. That is a team that you better be keeping your eye on at this event.
And one of the bizarre award handouts in that LCP is, we know Driver and Rest historically, these guys are splitting time. Driver played 10 out of the 17 games in the top lane. Despite that, he picks up MVP for the whole league, playing just over half of the games for his squad, and yet Kiaya was the first team All-Pro top laner. So I don't know what's going on there. That seems a little messy.
That is. I'm not buying that one little bit. I think your guy deserves the credit for what he's been putting out there in that starting role for it. But when you're talking about GAM, yes, that is important to look at and how they rotate and utilize both of those top laners, both of their skill sets and champion pools and what they can do. And then as well, of course, it still is a lot of the familiar that we're going to be stepping into with this GAM team, talking about Levi in the jungle being that beating heart for not only his team, but for the region, it has seemed for almost half a decade plus now.
Yeah, we're approaching a decade for Levi being the face of GAM, and obviously a lot of that is still the same play style, even though the name of the region has changed. The face and the style of GAM is always going to be the same. G2, as we alluded to, ahead of them. G2 might seem low in the 8th spot, and we'll get to some of these other squads, how they're down here. But this is the 4th straight MSI appearance for G2, and I know, similar to a team like T1, international event rolls around and G2 might overperform, even based on a lackluster finals that they had against Koi. But the biggest thing to note with this version of G2 is you still have two guys not making, well, Lebrov's not making his international debut, but you have a rookie jungler coming in here that's going to be matching up against some of the very best of the best. So there's more question marks than normal for a squad like G2.
And that's how you have to find out how you can help someone out in your squad, right? Try to find a way to give him a little bit of a boost, a little bit of an edge when you know that 1v1 within that jungle matchup is going to be intense, is going to be one where despite what you know you can believe in your skills and whatnot, you know that the experience point blank compared to a lot of these guys on the other side is going to be a deficit to overcome for G2. I think at the end of the day, this is a consequence of some of the failures we have seen from G2 on the international stage in the last couple of years, just short of what the expectations were type of deal. And then how they have looked throughout the LEC and how they have been challenged, how they have been overthrown by some of these other teams that have risen up the ladder in the region. I think this is where you see that consequence for a G2. You find them as low as where they are heading into an MSI event.
And historically, they have felt like the inevitability in the LEC, right? Regardless of how good other teams have looked in the regular season, when playoffs roll around, you can expect G2 to come away with the win. And it looked like they were on that trajectory when they made it to those finals without ever even needing to sniff that loser's bracket. But obviously, this little squad ahead of them named Movistar Koi had something else to say, and I feel like I'd be more confident if it was K-Corp that went on a similar run, and because we've seen them at first stand, we've seen them be the more consistent squad. But listen, credit where credit's due for Koi, because they absolutely leveled up in playoffs. They kind of proved that they can be less reliant on just having a solid laning phase early game and kind of snowballing that. They showed that they can find avenues to come from behind to get wins, or just kind of flip things and play around the map a lot better and have a macro game sense that they did not have early on in the split. And we saw the confidence for Mr. Jojo Pyun being able to pick things like Kassadin, like Akali in these high stakes matches, and we saw Supa kind of step back into that hyper carry role. And I think they found a nice balance where Supa is kind of the more consistent carry, whereas JoJo is a little bit of a maniac and can't be the main reliant. We know he is the furthest thing from a KDA player.
Yeah, and I think that early on it felt like that was what they were more or less forcing or trying to push through Jojo Pyun's play, the X factor, the clutch, decision-making, decisive type of play, and using that as the only angle, where we've now realized and seen this team play, and you can have the trust in players like Supa in the bottom lane to have these resources invested into them, to trust that the damage will be there, that you can utilize the X factor, the decisive call from Jojo Pyun. But that isn't all that the might is. It's not just the tip of the spear anymore. There's an army coming behind and being there and ready to fill in and to fill out the rest of this fight. Love that we have Movistar Koi here. I think you're right in saying that you can't have nearly the level of full confidence in their performance and what level you're going to get from them, maybe in the same way you would have expected if Carmine Corp was able to close out the LEC split or whatnot. But the world that we're living in is here with Movistar Koi. And right now, the form that they showed us through these LEC playoffs, that was the most recent. I think that is where you can take the confidence and take a bit of that, chip on your shoulder heading into this event if you are the LEC.
We're talking about two incredibly close series that they had against KC and then the one relatively dominant one that they had against G2. So still not a huge body of work where we've actually been incredibly impressed with Koi, but very excited to see them on that international stage. Last squad on this first list. People might say, how are you going to have CFO against LEC champion Koi? You got them higher. Well, may I introduce you to what happened at First Stand, what has happened at international events going back to the last couple of tournaments, and CFO, by the way, have not lost a series since February 8th. February 8th. We're into June here now, guys.
I can't even remember March, so I don't even know. Going all the way back to February, undefeated for CFO. Yes, welcome on back to the international stage. Very excited, very happy to welcome the Oysters on back, and especially after the performance we saw at First Stand, how they certainly proved that maybe you're not right up there on the same playing field, playing level as these top-tier teams from the LCK, from the LPL, the very best of the LTA and the LEC. But there's no question that you're going to make it a series. You're going to be involved. And if the other team isn't on their game, ain't bringing their A game to Summoner's Rift on that day, well, they're packing it on home because their Nexus is going to be taken down. That's the way CFO has operated. They have been very strong throughout their domestic strength and schedule. Yes, been tested, been pushed at times throughout the region, but certainly an unquestioned champion and one who I think is looking to pick up exactly where they left off at First Stand.
A classic bend but not break situation throughout all this playoff run for them. We're talking about the highest feats of strength percentage, Baron percentage, gold differential at 15, and dragon percentage among all major region teams throughout the entirety of the spring split. So yes, this squad has been incredibly dominant. That two-headed top lane dragon is, of course, one of the focal points. But now you're even talking about Hong Q having international experience under his belt and obviously surrounded by veterans. So excited to see the growth for this squad on the international stage. Similar could be said for a top 5 team on this list. FlyQuest we have as the highest ranking Western squad, one spot ahead of CFO. We know what this team did at Worlds. It's the same 5, and even though they were incredibly contested 2 series against Cloud9 in the playoffs, again, we've talked about it. Cloud9 is a team that's at a level that also deserves to be at this event.
I'm so happy that we have both of these teams, FlyQuest and CFO, just put right up together in this situation because I think they're both very similar in regards to that expectation, that power that you can see from these teams and what you're looking for from them, knowing that, yes, you know what, you're a step above everybody that we have talked about in this list so far as expectation on power level, competency, the consistency that you're going to bring, all these things. But is it enough to throw down against the very top, the ultra elites that we're going to have at this event? I don't think so. It's not enough to call it that it's going to be an upset type of thing, but it is one of these ones where you are going to be a good challenge on the day. And that's what we saw from CFO throughout that First Stand event against the very elite teams. And that's what we saw last Worlds around with FlyQuest against the very elite ultra tier of teams, that they are able to be an interesting angle, are able to push a game through to a series and have it be intense. That's what you're looking for. And as the only representative of the LTA North, I think a lot of people are hoping to see that FlyQuest at the event.
Yeah, when you only get 1 seed, it's easy to dodge play-in stage for FlyQuest. They're just right into that main round. But yeah, this is the first international event since that Worlds run for them. And you saw the emotion on Whippo and Inspired after winning that title, after missing out on First Stand. They're obviously hungry to be back on that international stage to prove themselves yet again. And remember last year, Masu and Busio at MSI in 2024, it was rough. They got absolutely gapped, and you saw the level up to World. So I'm very interested to see what level the bot lane in particular is against some pretty damn world-class bot lanes.
And I think that has to be the focus if you are FlyQuest, is looking at what that progression, what that improvement has been since the last iteration, last time around, right? We all know that MSI ended in failure for FlyQuest. It's a pretty spectacular failure with the expectations and hopes of the LCS at the time. But now we step into this one, and we step into it on home turf, and especially with Masu on the team, you're going to get quite a lot of Canadian pride and enthusiasm behind you. So I'm hoping that FlyQuest can deliver for the hometown fans.
As is tradition for any of these rankings, we get to the big dogs in the top 4. 2 LCK, 2 LPL squads, BLG at the bottom of this mountain. I mean, they lose back-to-back series against Anyone's Legend, and truthfully, it's a regression. It was closer in the winner's bracket and more dominant out of Anyone's Legend in those grand finals, and 2 out of the 3 playoff wins for BLG were against IG.
It feels like this whole, mountain, if it is, this list, if it's a mountain, right, it's going up. We've reached kind of a base camp type of level, and then the Sherpas come out and they go, okay, that's Mount Everest up there. Only extreme professional allowed up on this part. And that's where you start by looking over at the guy with his full oxygen tank and mask and everything. And that's BLG, ready to climb up this mountain, ready to go through it. Yes, welcome back to the international stage, BLG. We got the group chat, BLG, T1, G2. Everybody's involved in this one, of course. And BLG is coming on in fresh and hungry for a little bit of redemption, because I'm pretty sure that despite locking this spot up and getting this ticket to MSI and everything being all happy in that regard, there is a bit of anger. There's a bit of pain in losing to Anyone's Legend, and a bit of an embarrassment to be dismantled and overthrown by a team like that. So I'm betting on a fiery BLG at this event.
And there was a little bit of salt after that loss to AL. You heard, I think it was Ben talking about, wow, they didn't win, we lost the series. And you're going, okay, brother. Ben should not be allowed to do some of these interviews when they lose, because it is never anything good that's coming out of his mouth. AL absolutely were far and away the better team, well deserving of that championship.
At the same time, though, you need those little bit of sound bites. You need that locker room bulletin board material every once in a now to make it spicy, make it interesting. And I think that is that angle again that plays into BLG feeling disrespected and embarrassed by losing this title, not just to anyone else in the LPL, but to this up and coming, this ragtag group of survivors of the LPL that Anyone's Legend has blossomed and emerged as at the very forefront of it. I'm betting on BLG looking to take out some of that pain on the rest of the international community.
And I'm betting on AL proving that they deserve to be those LPL champions, as you see them sandwiched in between the pair of LCK squads. I think despite seeing the absolutely absurd level up that T1 got, especially against that Hanwha Life series, you still have to give credit where credit's due for Anyone's Legend, because it was only 2 series that T1 played in the playoffs where they looked completely leveled up, where the whole body of work for the split, Anyone's Legend absolutely has been a powerhouse in the LPL. But T1, what they did against Hanwha Life, they are peaking at the worst time for anyone else heading to this international event.
Oh man, it's that time of the year again. Yep, international time for T1. Turn on the turbo jets. Here we are back into this conversation. I like that you mentioned it's a sandwich. It feels like a very poorly constructed sandwich if we're taking these 3, because you've got the top bread and you've got your meats and cheeses all sandwiched up right and close, and then there's a gap between that bottom slice of bread, which is T1 at the 3 spot. I want to make that clear. Yes, excited, happy about T1 and the form that they showed throughout that playoff stretch to earn themselves and against all expectations, against the juggernauts in Hanwha Life, to make sure that they are the other team representing for the LCK. But still, it is one of these ones where they respect the power level that you're looking at for a squad like Anyone's Legend, like the unbeaten Gen G sitting on top of this one. You got to give some respect over to that power.
And listen, I know T1 International, they get that buff. They're looking terrifying against Hanwha. 4th straight MSI for them, though, and they haven't won an MSI since going back to 2017, a totally different era of T1. So it's been, by their standards, disappointment at MSI over the last half decade.
And the last MSI that we saw from T1, don't forget, it was very much so this pivot in strategy for so many teams to go, you know what? Faker's not playing anything that he wants to in this series. It ain't happening. We're taking care of it in ban, or we're playing it, whatever. And we have seen that strategy taken to a whole other level with Fearless Draft, with teams saying, yeah, we're taking 4 or 5 of your guys' champion pool in this first game. Let's see how you play out the rest of the series at that point onwards. I don't know if that is going to be necessarily where people will be attacking Faker. It's a different situation as far as the mid lane meta, where it was one of these ones where most of the options were outside of his comfort zone, which, again, saying something is outside of Faker's comfort zone is extremely rare occurrence here in League of Legends. But I think that that's something to look at for T1. What is going to be this strategy to try and take them down? Because you better believe that any other normal strategy, I don't think it's really going to cut it. It has to be something special, something unique crafted up for T1.
One guy's champion pool you're not hitting is probably anybody's on Gen G, especially Chovy. We saw the Zoe come out in Game 5 against Hanwha. What more can you say about this team? Haven't lost since February 22nd, which is not as good as the Flying Oysters, but this is the team with the highest team kill-death ratio, gold differential per minute, and damage per minute, so complete shift on what Gen G used to be, which is the boring team. Ain't nothing boring about this team that is now 20-0 and the defending MSI champions.
And some of the scariest, most certified killers on the international stage, as far as Ruler, Chovy, Canyon stepping on into this one, leading the charge for Gen G. Very much so thrilled and overwhelmed with what they have shown us this split and leading that top of the table across the world, right? Global power rankings, LCK power rankings, it doesn't matter. This perfection, this strength that we have seen from them has been at that very tippity top. And heading to this event, I've got no other expectations for them. This would be a very good time to pick up another international trophy type of thing for Gen G.
And if they're at the very tippity top of Mount Everest, they've been kicking off anyone who finally ascends to the top. Will and should be the overall tournament favorites in a still kind of stacked top half of the board. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute beauties. Thanks for hanging out, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.